Evil People, Chapter 1. We have evil people who run this country. Now that's the toughest thing you have to get used to. These people are not like you. They will do anything to get money and power. They're not like you at all. That's one of the toughest things to digest, especially because the media spends a lot of time sanitizing our leaders. The ruling elite are also very good at picking leaders who seem like regular guys, like us. When you see our leaders making gaffes, it's endearing to us. We laugh and we think, oh, they're just like us. But they're not like us. Because we don't go through our neighborhoods and beat people up. See, the world is like a giant neighborhood, and the different countries of the world are like the other families who live in that neighborhood. For the longest time now, our leaders have been running around the global neighborhood beating people up. Why should we be surprised? As Americans, we are not immune from behaving poorly. We are not always the good guys, a myth that has been pounded into us since childhood. My stepfather told me this when I was 16 years old. He said to me, "Don't you think that our guys are all angels?" And then he told me some harrowing stories of what he had seen in the South Pacific during World War II. Well, he was right. There are a lot of guys who are immoral in this world, and there are a lot of people who are immoral at the top. So when I tell you that we have leaders who happily run drugs in the United States of America, you're going to push back against that. You will push back against that because you will think that your leaders are just like you. But they're not like you. They're not like you at all. And now I'm going to tell you a story of drug running in the United States. Now this is something you probably haven't heard of. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. There was a reporter for the San Jose Mercury News named Gary Webb, and he wrote a book and a series of articles that were published in his paper many decades ago. It's called Dark Alliance. It's about how our leaders at the highest levels conspired to work with the Colombian cartels, the Contras from Nicaragua, and drug dealers in Los Angeles to import drugs into black communities all over the United States. Our leaders knew what they were doing. There's no question they knew what they were doing. Now, Gary Webb's detractors want you to think that his real name is George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones, and he made all this up in order to sell a fanciful story to the American public. Now, you can read this book yourself, and when you do, you will see the dizzying amount of detail that Gary Webb provides. He's not making this up. He's getting this from police officers, district attorneys, FBI agents, DEA agents, court records, drug traffickers, drug dealers, arms merchants, and some of the top guys themselves. It's not fantasy, it's fact. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the Iran-Contra affair. What you've probably heard is that the United States government was selling weapons to Iran and then using those funds to support the Contras. There's a certain amount of truth in that, but there's also a lot of truth that your mainstream media didn't tell you about because the truth was too much for you to handle, and certainly too much for our leaders who look the other way. See, certain elements within your DEA and your CIA were facilitating the transport of cocaine from Colombia through El Salvador into Los Angeles and other cities where it was being sold on the street as crack cocaine. The drug money was then shipped back to the Contras and the Colombian cartels. Weapons were purchased along the way. Now, there's no question that this was being done. There is a real three-dimensionality to the facts that Gary Webb presents. Here are the broad brushstrokes of the story. But first, a little background. Nicaragua, for many years, was run by a thug propped up by the U.S. His name was Antonio Somoza, and he and his family ran Nicaragua for decades. Along the way, he built up a patronage of lackeys and followers, people who benefited off the regime. The purpose of the regime was to do what the U.S. oligarchs desired, which was to use Nicaragua, like many other Central American countries, as a source for cheap agricultural products. As a consequence, peasants were paid meager wages in order to keep the price of coffee, bananas, and sugar low. Because these peasants were paid meager wages, they often lacked adequate housing, healthcare, and education. The U.S. oligarchs and Somoza were running an encomienda there, which is another name for feudalism. There were lots of campesinos, those are peasants, farmers, and lots of poverty. Somoza's credo was plata para los amigos, plomo para los enemigos, y palo para los indiferentes. Translated, this means silver for friends, lead for enemies, and stick, beatings for the indifferent. During the Somoza reign, which covered 4 decades, one father and 2 sons, the Somozas accumulated vast wealth. They had a piece of everything. There was no major enterprise in Nicaragua that the Somozas did not control. And they had the backing of the U.S. government, which helped create their reign of terror. And through their National Guard of Nicaragua, they terrified the people. But good things never last, and so it was only a matter of time before communist forces arose to overthrow the youngest Somoza, Anastasio Somoza Debayle, also known as Tachito, and his corrupt allies. These communist forces were the Sandinistas, and they came to power in 1979. Suddenly, Somoza and his cronies were out of power. Somoza himself escaped to Florida and then Paraguay, but the rest of his followers remained. Some escaped into nearby countries, some even came to the U.S. These people came to be known as Somocistas, and their desire was to take Nicaragua back from the Sandinistas. The U.S. government was all too willing to help. After all, we love cheap bananas. So a group was formed called the Contras, and their goal was to take the country back. But they needed money. Unfortunately, Congress wasn't all that compliant in providing the money, so other ways were devised to help them get that money. One of those ways was through the sale of drugs, specifically cocaine. Thank you.